You've probably heard of a cliche story starting with the lines, "It was a dark and stormy night." Or you've watched a horror movie where lightning crashes just before the serial killer strikes. It's an old and tired trope, the rain. And it's been around for a really, really long time. In fact, our stories have been using rain as the harbinger of doom since their very inception. Take Homer's Iliad, an epic written by Greek poet Homer. It tells of blood rains prophetic of bloody battles. Or Macbeth, a 1623 play written by Shakespeare, using rain as an indicator of the point of no return for the titular character. If dark themes were a story's sickness, then rain would undoubtedly be the prognostic symptom. But have we always associated rain with darkness? It isn't a stretch to say it's pretty oxymoronic. What has made evil linger in the back of our minds when we think of rain, so much so that our stories obligate themselves to present them hand in hand? How could rain be evil? Quantic Dream's Heavy Rain and Video Cult's Rain World have little in common save for their titles. The former is a story-driven, cinematic, psychological thriller set in 2010 Philadelphia. The latter is an exploration-focused survival platformer set in a far-off post-apocalypse, for lack of a better word. Yet, despite their differences, they still both make rain into something uniquely malevolent. In Heavy Rain, we play as Ethan Mars, one of the 4 protagonists in the story. The game opens with us, our wife Grace, and our sons, Jason and Sean, enjoying a sunny afternoon in a picturesque home. The game makes a point of showing us the weather, directing us out of the house and into the backyard. The scenes that follow are decorated with bright green grass and blue skies. Even in spite of the ridiculous QuickTime events,
use the controller to choose the son to play with first.
These scenes still do a good job communicating the warm relationship we have with our family by using both lighthearted banter and deeply personal moments. As we follow Ethan and his family into a mall, the game only doubles down on its efforts to sell us this bright, cheery atmosphere. The sun is beaming and the kids are playing and laughing. Later, our wife tells us to watch over Jason as she tries on some shoes with Sean. To our dismay, he disappears into the crowd of passers-by, leaving us stumbling about the mall to retrieve him. When we finally do, we find he has managed to cross the street. In an abrupt turn, Jason runs towards us directly into the path of a speeding car. Despite our efforts to protect him, Jason tragically dies in the accident, and we're left in a coma. From this point forward, Heavy Rain takes a sharp turn in tonality and mood. As you may have guessed, this turn can be distinctly identified by the sounds in sight of rain. Every cutscene will start with the time, date, and, curiously, the precipitation measurement. This is important later. The color has been drained out of the world, leaving a previously bright color palette desaturated into some combination of gray-browns and brown-grays. Our relationships have grown obviously distant. We learn that we parted ways with Grace, and that the accident has caused us to suffer unexplainable blackouts. We wake up hours later, somewhere in the middle of the street, sometime in the middle of the night. Our conversations with Sean are becoming more and more awkward.
So, do you want to talk a little?
Talk about what?
I don't know, about you, your friends, how things are going.
Nothing special.
As we're still grappling with the guilt of Jason's death. Later, Ethan takes Sean to a park after school, but a badly timed blackout leaves him waking up hours later to find him missing. Horrified, he goes to the police station and both he and the player are left unsure of what to do. Up until this point, we had picked up some clues about a serial killer called the Origami Killer, a really eccentric guy who only kills young boys from 8 to 13. The police find the victims' bodies, with orchids and origami animals. Cause of death? Drowning by rainwater. It isn't too hard to put the pieces together, and we're given only 4 days to stop Sean's impending drowning. I think it's fascinating how the rain in Heavy Rain manages to make itself so much more than a marker of tone. This game becomes so entwined with it. The rain doesn't just fall, it counts. The precipitation measurements, that I mentioned before, now act as a declared time of death, and the rainfall, which was before just a set piece, becomes almost a character itself, and it makes itself front and center in the story. The rain is an uncaring, cruel inevitability. In fact, even after we save Sean, the downpour persists. It's a subtle reminder that things can't return to normal. The other victims still died, Ethan and Grace are still grieving, and the story's other characters are still struggling. It's worthwhile to mention that the rain doesn't stop in most of the endings. In fact, the rain doesn't stop in what the community deems the game's best possible ending. While Rain World lacks the peculiar serial killers and endless QuickTime events of Heavy Rain, Rainfall is just as pervasive in its story. We play as the aptly named Slug Cat traversing through a mechanical wasteland. When we first get thrown into this world, the game teaches us a few simple things. First, we need to eat. To eat, you hunt small animals and forage for berries. Simple. Second, you need to travel. The game teaches you climbing, jumping, and crawling through pipes. After these simple lessons, the game tells us something ominous. Rain is coming. Find shelter. The screen darkens and the entire ground shakes violently. Whatever rain this is, it's probably not something we, a small creature, want to be caught in. After finding shelter and hibernating through the rain, we find ourselves back in the wiry, mechanical world. Later, we reach an open area where we meet our first predators. Strange, multicolored lizards whom we quickly learn are in our best interest to avoid. Then, we meet vultures, spindly creatures who move with uncanny fluidity, able to squeeze into gaps to hunt for prey. And it's not just us. These vultures seem to be the top of the food chain, indifferent as to whether their next meal will be a lizard or slug cat. We slowly get used to Rain World systems as we play. We get used to running into shelters to avoid rain, hibernating, and coming out to face this world all over again. These periodic downpours become a dominant part of gameplay. The surface becomes hostile, droplets batter the ground and make movement impossible, and underground chambers are hardly safer, quickly flooding. Not even in periods of aridity can we escape the looming arrival of precipitation. The environment itself is constantly in a state of recovering. With ambient water dripping and flowing, we're continually reminded of the downpour to come. Eventually, you'll notice something. Whether it was in your first time getting caught in the torrential downpour, or because you've got a particularly keen eye keeping track of enemies, you'll learn that it isn't just Slugcat that needs to hide from the rain. It's everything. Small flies, lizards, and even the vultures are drowned all the same. In this world, the top of the food chain is the rain, an inevitable reset that comes to drown every ill-prepared creature, unprejudiced in its arrival. Also, I just want to say props to this game's phenomenal design of rain. Both the visuals and sound effects do such an amazing job selling just how violent it is, and honestly makes it seem like a real threat when you're playing. Although the rain already cemented itself in our minds in the first minutes of gameplay, I think we can only understand it by learning where it comes from and what it does. Centuries ago, an intelligent species built the Iterators, computers that towered high above the clouds and spread across vast stretches of land. You can get a sense of their sheer size in the game as you travel. They were daunting megacomputers, designed to solve a problem. That problem being that no one could die. Everything in Rain World is trapped in a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. This means that when Slugcat dies, he respawns by virtue of this world's biology. not by video game logic. The intelligent species, or the ancients, sought to find a way to end this cycle. They did, through a goop called void fluid, but they found an unwanted side effect turned some of them into echoes, leaving them trapped between life and death. This is the problem the iterators were built to solve. The iterators ran hundreds of thousands of calculations attempting to solve the big problem. Eventually, they became the basis of civilization for the ancients. Before they could actually solve the problem, however, the ancients all died to void fluid anyways, leaving these aimless iterators alone on Rainworld with the unfortunate and ironic stipulation that they were strictly forbidden from self-destructing. The rain in Rainworld comes from these iterators' computational needs. They use tremendous amounts of water to cool down their systems, which gets turned into vapor. This vapor builds up and then violently rains down on the denizens of nearby ecosystems. Thus, the nature of the downpour in Rainworld is a pivotal part of this place's world building. Just as life and death became an inescapable cycle, the rain becomes a mechanism for that cycle. It perpetuates and embodies it. By resetting wildlife and dampening landscapes, it simultaneously underscores the meaninglessness of the iterator's existence while becoming a core part of gameplay. Both Rainworld and Heavy Rain make the presence of rain something much greater than an atmospheric shift. For both these games, the showers indicate overarching themes by acting as indifferent, inevitable forces. Looking at it from this perspective, it seems the rain isn't malevolent at all. No person blames the stormy fall weather for Sean's death. No creatures blame the rain for the iterator's dilemma. So, in a lot of senses, it isn't the rain's fault. But what if it was? On Monday in April 1986, a warm sunny day in Novozybkov, Russia was interrupted by an aberrant cluster of dark clouds. An unusually torrential downpour had residents running for shelter. It left as quickly as it came, dissipating after just 40 minutes. Sometime in the late 27th century, it is a beautiful, tranquil day somewhere in the United States. Suddenly, a cluster of dark clouds roll over the landscape, and a rain shower sends us running for shelter. It leaves as quickly as it comes, dissipating after only a few minutes. What the citizens of Novozybkov didn't know was that 3 days earlier, in a nuclear power plant 200 kilometers away from the city, there was an explosion. Kojima's 2019 game, Death Stranding, opens with the following quote. Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave birth to time and space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which sent a planet spinning in that space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then came the next explosion. We get to see the breathtaking world of Death Stranding in the opening sequence of the game. The camera sweeps over blankets of moss covering jagged rocks. Deep hues of green and pink dot a horizon of mountainous terrain. The environments are incredibly rich in texture and majesty. In this sense, Death Stranding's first act is somewhat similar to that of Heavy Rain's. We're initially drawn into this lush, beautiful environment just to be caught in the downpour. But, unlike Heavy Rain's desaturation, Death Stranding quickly returns the bright colors to the game. So what gives? Half the malevolence of rain thus far has come directly from the dreary atmosphere it brings. The ominous rainstorm of Macbeth, the desaturation of Heavy Rain, and the dark looming shaking in Rainworld. So, where is the malevolence in Death Stranding if the rain lets up after just a few measly drops? The answer is Timefall. supernatural precipitation that steals time from everything it touches. The effect is as deadly as it is invisible, immediately aging anything it comes in contact with by decades. A single drop turns our protagonist's hand wrinkled and old. The soil the rain falls upon sprouts plants just for them to die moments later. It's a striking dichotomy that parallels our relationship with rain in the real world, simultaneously the bringer of life and a symbol of its end. For Novozybkov, the invisible threat was radiation. When Chernobyl exploded, over 100 radioactive elements were released into the atmosphere. Later, these elements rained down on the town of unsuspecting citizens. Possible side effects? Increased risks of leukemia, cataracts, cancer, genetic conditions like Down syndrome and cerebral palsy, thyroid conditions, and birth defects. The radiation killed plants and animals and left food contaminated to the point of being lethal. In spite of this, the color returned to Novozybkov just as it did for Stranding. After the rain subsided, children went to school, parents went to work, preparations for the forthcoming May parade never ceased, and life continued as normal. There's something intensely unsettling to radioactive rain, even without considering the radiation. Rain that leaves behind an evil that lingers for hundreds of years and, as invisible as it is, claimed the lives of countless. For Stranding and Novozybkov, rain is insidious. We fall prey to a seemingly insurmountable force, intangible and incomprehensible. These rains bring us closer to something primal, something a simple umbrella or raincoat just can't shield you from anymore. Maybe it reminds us of a time when there really was something to fear in the rain, when our relationship with it was as delicate of a balance as that of those dying seedlings with Timefall. Come to think of it, the world of Stranding only continues to exemplify this quandary. Instead of conquering the rain, humanity hid. The populace retreated to isolated cities, completely sequestered from one another, save for porters who transport what little supplies they can. The rain is unconcerned with class, status, and materialism, driving humanity to extinction with apathetic efficiency. Just like the downpour of Rain World, the rain becomes the great equalizer for these stories, and I think that's terrifying. I guess one would posit from these stories that we aren't afraid of the rain anymore. These worlds seem so far away from reality. It feels as if the persisting fear of rain seems to only manifest in the deep recesses of our mind. I can assure you, this position couldn't be farther from the truth. Bong Joon-ho's acclaimed 2019 movie Parasite is not a movie about rain. It's a movie about class, status, and materialism, and it's a comedy at that. We begin on the Kims, a South Korean family struggling to make ends meet, cramming 4 people into a semi-basement apartment. Ki-tae and Chung-suk, the patriarch and matriarch, who I will be referring to as Mr. and Mrs. Kim to avoid butchering the pronunciation, are having trouble finding employment. Their children, Ki-woo, the older brother, and Ki-jung, younger sister, are trying to help in whatever way they can. Out of the blue, Ki-woo's successful friend, Min Hyuk, offers him a referral to a tutoring position for the exorbitantly wealthy Park family, hence kicks off the plot. Ki-woo ingratiates himself in Mrs. Park's favor with a forged degree and charming demeanor, landing him a position as her eldest daughter's tutor. One day, Mrs. Park mentions in passing that she's having a hard time keeping an art teacher for her young son. The camera pans up at Ki-woo into the clouds as he has a moment of inspiration. The next thing we know, his sister is walking up to the house alongside him. She is now Jessica, the renowned art teacher who graduated top of her class. At the end of her lesson, she manages to ascertain a certain traumatic incident that impacts Mrs. Park's son, asserting that art therapy can help him recover. Mrs. Park is shocked, appalled, and utterly impressed. Thus, Jessica too wins over Mrs. Park with her unconventional teaching methods and persona, having manipulated her concern for her son. Later, Ki-jung plants some incriminating evidence in the park driver's car as he drives her home, setting off the next string of events. Before long, Mr. Kim is the park's new driver. The finale of our comedy movie is a music-filled takedown plan montage of the housemaid. The Kims set up a plan to frame the maid for having tuberculosis of all things, by setting off her allergy to peaches. Concerned, Mrs. Park can't help but to dismiss her immediately after being reminded of her vulnerable son. The airy montage is capped off by the Kims inundated into the Park home. The Park family has gone off camping, leaving the Kims to enjoy an evening with the house to themselves. As they joke and lounge in the living room, a thunderstorm is crashing outside. This is where Parasite ends, the comedy movie. And this is where Parasite begins. The atmosphere is palpably dark, and the pitch black of the park garden only exacerbates this feeling. But the luxurious park home shockingly has a roof. Our characters are safe from the rain, sheltered by a brightly lit living room. In actuality, the rain is a comforting backdrop. The true mark of Parasite's transition is the sound of a ringing doorbell. It's the old housekeeper. She's standing outside, sopping wet, claiming she left something of hers in the kitchen basement. When she's let in, we learn her husband is the thing that's been left in the basement, and he's been living there for years. Mrs. Kim immediately threatens to call the police. In turn, the housemaid promises to reveal the Kim family's connection to Mrs. Park, bringing them all down together. The sequence turns into a tumultuous fight, only ending once Mrs. Park calls the home. She informs Mrs. Kim that she and her family will be home in 8 minutes as their camping trip was rained out, and instructs Mrs. Kim to prepare some instant noodles for her son. So, our characters are given only 8 minutes to clean the mess and get out. That includes hiding all the bottles and wrappers, constraining the housemaid and her husband, cooking instant noodles, putting everything they moved back into place, and somehow getting themselves out of the house. They finish with only seconds to spare, sneaking out of the home and avoiding detection. Bong Joon-ho dedicates 5 whole minutes to showing the Kims running back down to their sub-level apartment. It's a really raw scene, with the family at a complete loss. Once they reach it, they are completely soaked in rainwater, and, to top it off, their small apartment is also nearly submerged in sewage water. Mr. Park can only save what's important before the entire place is filled. The Kims end up sleeping in a gymnasium, with hundreds of other displaced families. When they're called back to the Park household, it's a gorgeous day outside. Mrs. Park remarks what a blessing the rain was while planning an impromptu garden party. The garden party is undoubtedly the climax of the movie. Just as the events are getting started, the old housemaid's husband comes running out of the basement holding a knife. It turns out, during the fight last night, the housekeeper suffered a concussion and died. Now, the man's got a vendetta to resolve. The next scenes are brutal. Ki-woo is left bleeding out on the floor, Ki-jung is stabbed, and Mrs. Kim is in an intense fight with the man. And in all this, all Mr. Park can worry about is his son, who merely fainted from the ordeal. Mr. Kim snaps. His daughter was stabbed, his son is dying, and all Mr. Park concerns himself with is his son. So he picks up the knife and he kills Mr. Park. This whole scene takes place in broad daylight. An interesting choice that defies the audience's expectations of atmosphere and weather. When we're in the park home, we can barely hear it. It's even pleasant. But when we venture down to the Kim's home, it's omnipresent. It's profoundly representative of how the lower classes of society are disproportionately impacted by not just rain, but so many other things we might take as everyday. Mrs. Park's line is also pivotal to highlighting this transformation. We can hear her talking about the rain being a blessing, right next to Mr. Kim, who lost a home alongside many others. In contrast with the equalizing rains of Rain World and Death Stranding, Parasite's thunderstorm underscores intensifying inequalities. In June of 2022, it began raining in Pakistan. Fall was finally here after an exceptionally dry, hot summer, and it would rain for some time. By October of 2022, the rain hadn't stopped. The provinces of Sindh and Balochistan were crushed in nearly 7 feet of rainwater. The floods killed and injured thousands of people. It misplaced 2 million citizens and affected another 33 million. 3 children died in Sindh when their home's roof collapsed. The waters also contaminated drinking sources, making disease rampant. The floods were caused by unusually high rates of precipitation, many times stronger than usual, likely attributed to climate change. Personally, I was shocked that I had no recollection of this event. To me, that summer was one that was just slightly hotter than usual. For many people, it's not just losing their homes, but it's losing their livelihoods. It's being left with nowhere to go. The turning point in Parasite shows us the clear dissonance between two classes, one which is sheltered and the other which has to brave the rain. In many senses, that dissonance mirrors our own dispositions, where we are the parks, believing the rain to be such a blessing despite it being only ostensibly so. I like to think that we stopped being afraid of rain once we learned how to seek shelter. Rain was then redefined in our culture as the comforting pitter-patter against windows. Then, we grew acquainted with it. We studied and slept to 10-hour rain compilations. Maybe those depictions of rain in our stories and games come from a time we, in many ways, think is long gone. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I hope you found what I had to say at least somewhat interesting, and if not, at the very least learned something cool about a game or movie along the way. Super huge thank you to Christian Cryers, who helped me throughout the entire video making process. I guarantee if it wasn't for him, this would have been many, many times worse than it already is. You should go watch his stuff because it's really amazing.